Before we get into the video, make sure y'all hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. I mean, come on, what are you doing if you're not subbed to me by now? My content is fire, from stop motions, news videos, reviews, music occasionally. All my social media accounts are linked down below, and now, let's get straight to it. Okay, so, we've got some very intriguing news here. So, on the TFW boards, not too long ago, somebody by the name of CyberGraptor, he said that he attended the test screening for Rise of the Beast July of last year, 2022, and he's comparing what was seen in the movie that just came out this past week and what he saw in the test screening, and there are quite a bit of major differences in this July cut compared to the version of the movie we have just received. First one here is the transit fight. He says, "This scene was one of the more completed sequences in my cut since the rest of the movie was still very much in production." So the movie originally opens with an Optimus Prime monologue about how for the last few years the Autobots have stayed hidden as they continue to be hunted by Decepticons. But he's still determined to find a way to get back home and take the fight back to Cybertron, and there's a line about how the hunted have now become the hunters. Visually, you see stars that transition to the wet streets of NY as Prime drives through the city and pulls into a bus lot. He transforms, you see this in the second trailer, and announces, "I know you're here." A bus pulls out, revealing a Decepticon logo on the front grille, and transforms, saying things like, "You can't find us all, Prime. We'll get you eventually." A fight ensues, and it's pretty sick. There's a part where Prime grabs Transit's head and pushes it into a nearby bus and grinds it throughout the inside of the bus. Prime demands to know where the Khan's ship is, but Transit laughs and tells him that he blew up his ship just for the satisfaction of knowing the Autobots can't get off this planet to save his Autobots back home. And even shows a hologram of Autobots being executed as they swear Optimus will return to save them. And this pisses Prime off. I don't remember the specifics of how Transit dies, but I know Prime uses his axe, which in my version they borrowed the DOTM axe model, and that was actually the only time he used the axe in my cut. The scene ends with Optimus dragging Transit's body and dumping it into a nearby river, and as it floats, Transit lands on top of a revealed pile of cons, so you know Optimus has been doing this for a while. He monologues about not giving up on finding a way off Earth and back home. This then transitions to Noah back home. That is interesting. Very dark, very cool, and horror-ish sounding fight scene. You know, this takes place in the dark, it's raining, and it seems like a very vicious fight, and even the dialogue sounds very vicious, especially from Transit, and Optimus grinding his head through the inside of a bus. And especially at the end, this really explains what the Decepticons are up to at the time of Rise of the Beast. You know, they're looking for Optimus Prime and the other Autobots that have left Cybertron, while the remaining Autobots back on Cybertron are still defending the planet from the Decepticons. So I hope this is still canon in the new universe here that Rise of the Beast and the Bumblebee movie have started. So hopefully by the second movie we could get Megatron and the Decepticons, or at least some form of a Decepticon team in the next movie. So that reveals a whole lot about what they sort of plan to do with the Decepticons, at least in this movie, and hopefully what they sort of move into in the sequel, which is pretty cool. And then he says here, as for the ending battle, there were a good amount of changes with how it was approached. One was the original plan to destroy the control console using Air Razor's deceased Spark as a bomb. I can't remember how they lose the bomb, but they have to change plans using the codes Elena found to stop it instead. Then there's Mirage's fate. In my cut, Mirage first turns into a shield-like form and protects Noah from Scourge's attacks. Then the scene plays out like normal and he turns into the suit, but doesn't hint at him being okay. This version ends on the assumption that Mirage sacrifices himself to become the suit, and that's it. Then there's the big change. Instead of Prime escaping from being pulled in by the transwarp key explosion, in my cut he actually didn't. He gets sucked up and everyone assumes he died sacrificing himself. This leaves the movie with only 3 of the original Autobots and Stratosphere alive, and everyone kind of feels like shit. I think that shot was in one of the trailers or ads too. This goes into Noah embracing his family, and that's how the film ended. The after-credits scene reveals Optimus has survived the transwarp teleportation and drifts into space towards Unicron. He floats inside Unicron, where his 2 big eyes open, looking straight at Optimus, cuts to black. This change was also interesting since this was the only time we saw Unicron's eyes, as the earlier scene with Scourge and Unicron after the museum fight just had either a burning light or his planet form, hard to remember, looming over him instead. That is pretty interesting, especially the last part about Optimus being teleported to Unicron at the very end of this movie. That is pretty insane. I'm assuming they were probably going to do the whole Nemesis Prime trope. I'm hoping, they don't go into that again for the sequel or the 3rd movie, because we literally just had that in the Abomination of the Last Night, and it wasn't even handled well. We just had Unicron 2, so even them bringing in Unicron and killing off Bumblebee in this movie, which we just had in the Bumblebee movie, is a bit much and not really, moving things forward as much as we probably would have liked. But still, the way they handled it in this movie is way better than The Last Night, obviously. So, I don't know. Maybe if they want to do Nemesis Prime, maybe they could do it justice this time around. Who knows? But I hope they don't go that route. But that is a crazy ending that they did consider pretty late into production, it seems like. I don't know when they decided to change it, but it seems like there were a couple endings they had in mind for this movie, and that was definitely one of them that was shown off. So that would have been a crazy ending. I don't think I would have liked that, because that definitely implies some sort of Nemesis Prime plot, and I really don't care about seeing that. I'd rather see Megatron and the Decepticons before another shot at Nemesis Prime in live action. And then the person writes here, there were a bunch of other small changes. Here's what I remember. There was a shot of Airazor flying over New York after Elena discovers the Falcon vase. Bumblebee explains humans aren't all bad to Optimus at the Autobot meetup scene instead of before the museum. The people, they ain't all bad. In fact, the whole scene of Optimus, RC, and B waiting for Mirage and Noah outside the island was an additional scene. Same goes for Mirage explaining Optimus to Noah in the car. Since Optimus didn't have his beginning monologue explaining the situation, they added the scene to do that instead. By the way, I really love that scene in the film where Mirage is explaining Optimus's current mindset, and I love just the shots and angles of them showing off Optimus's truck driving through while Mirage is talking about Optimus. That was a really cool scene. I forgot to mention that in my review. Another widely known cut was the Wheeljack and RC relationship. When the bots land in Peru, RC hears Wheeljack is joining and gets flustered. Wheeljack's coming? Later on, while RC is inside Wheeljack waiting for Noah and Elena, RC mentions how it's been a long time since they've seen each other, and Wheeljack embarrassingly says, "Yes, it's been a while since you've been inside me." The final battle has Wheeljack be a little more concerned for RC too when they get swarmed. One scene I wish they saved was when the Autobots are staking out the city in Peru. Wheeljack lends his glasses to Optimus to zoom in, so there's a little funny look of Optimus wearing Wheeljack's glasses that was sadly cut out. That scene would have been so memeable. I really hope they put that in one of those DVD cuts that Steven Caple Jr. is hinting at. I could really see a lot of community memes and just a lot of conversation about that scene. I would love to see Optimus Prime wearing those big dorky Pablo glasses. That would be so amazing. They really should have kept that in the movie. And then the person writes here, there's a cool line where the heroes are charging. Scourge just looks at them and says, "Defend the bridge," and that's when a gate appears, releasing the Terracon army. Instead of them being materialized, Optimus has another little inspiring speech before charge too. I'm glad they changed that up a little bit, because Optimus Prime having like a 5th speech in this movie would have been a bit much, because he already has an ending speech. He has a bit of a beginning monologue, not monologue, more of like a speech to the team before they go off to Peru. And then there's another little one in Peru right before they have the final battle or something like that, from remembering things correctly. So I'm glad they sort of cut this out. He writes here, the lines about Optimus Primal's name being an inspiration from Optimus's name were added. Good, since I thought that was bizarre that they gloss over that. Yeah, I'm glad they really add that in, but I just wish it would have explained more of the Maximals being from the future, like it's confirmed and hinted at in this movie. Airazor saying from both your past and future, talking about how the transwarp can travel through time as well, and obviously the line about Optimus Primal's name being inspired by Optimus Prime. So they're clearly saying that the Maximals are still from the future. So I just wish there was a bit more time to talk about that, but whatever. Airazor's introduction to the Autobots was slightly changed since there was originally no Maximal planet opening. Like Optimus in 2007, she uses her eyes to show holograms of her planet for a quick scene of a bunch of generic beasts being chased by two Scorponoks and Scourge as he fires his blaster at them. She then shows Unicron and tricks Noah and Elena's vision with holograms of as if Unicron was in the sky, about to consume the Earth, showing them the threat that now faces them. If I recall correctly, Optimus originally thinks Unicron was a myth, but Airazor reassures him he's real. The scene with Elena saying it's not real was there too. I wish they would have kept in the shot of Airazor showing off the hologram with her eyes. That would have been pretty cool, but I understand why they cut it, because it's sort of redundant, but it would have been a cool way to sort of sneak in some cameos of some other lesser-known Beast Wars characters similar to Ape-Link, some C or D-list Beast Wars era characters. That would have been kind of cool, but it is what it is. And then he writes, Airazor and Elena had more communication between each other. In the scene where they're waiting for Stratosphere, there's a part where Elena mentions how she bets Airazor was making bots turn their necks as she flew by, with Airazor agreeing, I did know to shake a tail feather or two. That would have been cool. As you guys saw in my review for Rise of the Beast, I really loved the relationship between Airazor and Elena, even though it was sort of brief in the movie, and I really wish we get more scenes from the director's cut or whatever showing off this stuff with Airazor and Elena. That would have been cool. And then he says, in fact, that whole scene was different. Stratosphere doesn't even show up. It's just them grouping up and having more dialogue, and then someone asks how they're going to get to Peru, and smash cutting to them inside Stratosphere. Mirage makes a joke that they are probably going to crash, but Stratosphere responds saying they are safe inside him. Here, Noah and Elena's dialogue was a bit different. I don't think Elena ever mentions her dad, and Noah explains that he's worked with military people like Optimus before and doesn't trust him. So I'm glad they changed that scene. They added in the whole Stratosphere talking to the Autobots. It seems a bit more, Transformers-y, and this seems a bit less. I don't like the fact that it originally smash cut to them inside Stratosphere instead of the whole, Stratosphere transforming and that whole sort of bit. So I'm glad they switched that up a little bit. And then the person writes here, Stratosphere still transformed in the film. The scene where he transforms with Bumblebee in hand was the first time you see him in my cut. The scene with Noah and Elena going through the caverns and finding the empty key tomb was followed by the Freezer attacking them, but after Noah blasts it, they get discovered by Cheetor and Rhinox. The Maximals chase the humans around the caverns for a while until Rhinox chases them to a crack only the humans can fit to. That's when they lead out into the jungle to be stopped by Primal. The first teaser's shot of Rhinox is from the scene. Yeah, I was wondering where that shot of Rhinox inside of the cave went, and evidently it is cut, which I don't think that really impacts the quality of the film at all. If anything, it would have just meant more screen time for Cheetor and Rhinox, which would have been cool, and it is what it is, And then another part here, when Mirage says, don't ask what part of my body it came from, Wheeljack follows up and says he's talking about his butt. That would have been kind of funny to see, but I kind of understand why they cut it out. I think just Mirage saying that part is funny enough, and I think if Wheeljack followed that up with what he said, would have been a little bit over the top maybe, or that's just me. And then the next thing here, Scourge's character was twisted between cuts too. He had some lines that made you know he was forced and tortured working for Unicron. When Scourge and Unicron have the meeting, Unicron ends it by threatening to make his life a living hell if he doesn't find the remaining transwarp key, and Scourge responds to himself afterwards with, it already is. When Scourge meets Primal after corrupting Airazor, there was some dialogue between the two that made it seem like they knew each other personally, but I can't remember the exact words. Near his death, Optimus tells Scourge to stop the transwarp keys, and Scourge mentions something like, "It's too late. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't stop the keys now." A lot of the new lines in the official cut make him seem more like a cookie-cutter villain with only the drive to do what Unicron demands. Also, his design was the one from the promotional art and toys. They showed his final design for a split second in one of the more completed scenes, so I knew he was going to be changed. That's pretty cool that we now know, obviously, that was the original plan design for Scourge until the delay, and they changed up his neck and his body and stuff like that. So, I would have liked to have seen that type of dialogue with Scourge, more so explaining his background and how he was forced into serving Unicron, because we do get hints of that still in the movie in a line or two where they're talking, but not to the point of this right here, and I really wish they would have kept this stuff in. He writes here, the scene at the end with the G.I. Joe tease was obviously added in later, including the Elena redemption part. I was part of the focus group at the end, and I remember we all realized that Elena didn't have any resolution to her arc, so I'm glad they add that in. Good on them for doing that. That was a cool little touch to kind of put a bow on her story in the movie. I kind of hope she shows up in a future movie, but if she doesn't, not the end of the world. Obviously, this includes the Mirage surviving scene being a later addition too. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the decision, since that means everyone can get revived. I sort of see what he's saying, and I'm kind of glad they added the Mirage post-credit scene in, but at the same time, I wish it was something a bit more important leading up to a sequel, maybe showing off Decepticons, Megatron, or showing off Unicron getting another Herald ready to invade Earth. Something along those lines. That's what I really thought the post-credit scene was going to be, not Mirage getting revived. Which I really wish they would have just kept it at him becoming the exosuit, so it leaves off sort of a cliffhanger for his fate. Because I feel like the deaths in this movie were a bit faked out too much, with Bumblebee and Mirage and Optimus getting saved and stuff like that. The only real death, on the good guy's side at least, is Airazor. So, Mirage, and then he writes here, Mirage seemed more insufferable in my cut. I remember rolling my eyes more than half the time he spoke. I think he's better in the official cut. That's interesting to hear. That's sort of what I expected Mirage to be in the final cut, but I'm really glad they changed him to something a bit more likable and caring sort of too, which I really like. Mirage has probably become one of my favorite live-action Autobot characters, probably. He says here, Mirage's head crest was white, like what we see in the promotional material. Also, he never had the weird Vader mask thing. Don't know what that was all about. Then he continues to write here, when Mirage turns into Garbage Truck, they made it more clear the back half was a hologram. Optimus' character arc was a little wishy-washy in my cut. He seemed to not like humans at all for the majority of the film until Noah decides not to shoot the transwarp key. Then after the whole Airazor death scene, Optimus makes a speech about how great humans are and how wrong he was. It was a bit jarring how quick Optimus decides to trust humans and protect Earth. I'm glad they gave Optimus a bit more scenes with Noah to pad out the trust and care he develops for Earth. This speech also had Optimus say for Cybertron, Primal says for Earth, and Rhinox jumps in and says for home, and they all turn to Rhinox and Noah says, "You can talk." This scene in the trailer about how big can this guy be was also in the scene, but was obviously cut out. I really wish they had kept in the Rhinox part to at least give him a line that's audible and not a line or two where you could barely hear or realize it's Rhinox talking, because his voice is sort of similar to Primal. He has one or two lines in this movie, and it sounds like Primal is talking due to how they're delivered. So I hope that gets remedied in a sequel if Rhinox ever shows up again. And then the next thing he writes here, in the final battle, Cheetor says the line, "We're right behind you, Big Bot." Really wish that was kept in there. I was waiting for Cheetor to allude to the Big Bot line, but we never got it. So hopefully in the director's cut we get that. I'm hoping for that. Primal kills Battletrap the same way, but Optimus wasn't there to help him kill him and make the joke. Glad that was added in. When Airazor is escaping with Elena and the key, my cut had the DOTM track, "I'm Just a Messenger," with a bit of a jungle beat playing. I wish that was still there. That would have been cool, nice little nod, but I'm glad they added in more original music, because it sort of felt like towards the end they were banking on nostalgia with using original tracks from the Bayverse, so I'm glad they didn't include that in, to me personally. When Primal fights the corrupted Airazor doesn't talk back or says to kill her. She's completely feral. Also, Primal snaps her neck instead of crushing her chest. I'm glad the scene was changed up. It makes it a lot more emotional and just a better scene in general. When Unicron is entering through the transwarp portal, he sucks the energon from around the area, including where B is, causing the energon to go through B first. Also, B is considered dead in my cut. There's no lines about possibly saving him, so they just like carrying around his body. Yeah, that's kind of weird. I'm glad they added in the whole sort of... They didn't say stasis lock in the movie, but they alluded to him just being in stasis, so I'm glad they sort of changed that up a little bit. Primal says Maximals maximize instead of calling out Cheetor and Rhinox specifically. That change, it could go either way. I wouldn't have minded them saying Maximals maximize or him calling both of their names out like we have in the final cut. When Unicron drops Scorponok onto the battlefield, Noah yells what those things are and Primal responds, Predacons. I can understand why they cut that part out, because it seems like they wanted to simplify this movie as much as possible, and it seems like Predacons and Decepticons were basically cut out of the movie in the final cut, so I don't mind that too much. It simplifies the movie, and it just leaves it up in the air whether the Scorpion drones are just a part of the Terracon army, or if they're Predacons. Hopefully that gets explained one day. I don't know. Like Optimus's axe, his swords were the first trilogy swords that were probably placeholders until they designed the new ones. That's a cool little Easter egg. Noah gives the final speech alone since Prime was teleported and assumed dead. And that is all the person can remember from the cut of 2022 when he went to go see the test screening. I'm glad they changed that whole ending. I would not have cared about Noah giving the speech with Prime being assumed dead. It seems way too early since this is the start of the trilogy. I am so glad they kept Optimus the way he is in the final cut. So a lot of these changes I'm glad they made, because I wouldn't have liked the movie as much. But some of the scenes they took out, I would have wished they kept in, like the Rhinox scene and the more scenes with Airazor and Elena's relationship. All that stuff would have been cool, and of course the opening scene with Transit, explaining more so what the Decepticons have been up to in the last 7 years. So yeah, this is really interesting, finding out what got changed in the past year. So yeah, guys, that is the only thing I wanted to cover in this video. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you guys think? Which cut do you prefer, the 2022 test screening from July or the version we just got last week, officially in theaters now? Let me know down below. I'll catch y'all in the next video. Bye.